Customerland is a podcast about customers, how to get more of them, how to keep them, what makes them tick. We talk to the experts, the technologies, and occasionally actual people, customers, to find out what they're all about. So if you're a CX pro, a loyalty marketer, a brand owner, an agency planner, if you're a CRM and personalization geek, if you're a customer service, CSAT, NPS nerd, you finally have a home. I'm Mike Giambattista. Welcome to Customerland. Today I'm honored to be speaking with Dr. Ori Faran, who's CEO of CallVu. And for those of you who are not familiar with CallVu, actually, rather than me describe it, I'm gonna ask Ori to do a far better job of that than I could. Suffice it to say, however, that Ori is as passionate and knowledgeable about the intricacies and the challenges of customer experience as anyone we've spoken with here. So for that reason alone, I'm very excited to have this conversation. Ori, thank you so much for joining me.
Mike, thank you for having me. That's delightful to be here.
So could you tell us a little bit about CallVu, your role there, and maybe just to back it up a little bit even further, was why CallVu was created, why it exists?
Yeah, great. Thank you for the question. So CallVu, and I'll just start with the name. We started the company with channels, and then got all the way to no-code creation of any customer experience digitally. Starting from the very top, CallVu was created around viewing the call, specifically later actually named Visual IVR. The founding team, we worked at companies that created IVRs, interactive voice response, this automated voice that takes the call as soon as you call anywhere actually and says, "Thank you for calling. What do you want to do? Say or press 1, 2, 3, 4." And we figured that the projects are always challenging because somehow it's very expensive all over the place, from technology to the human resource, and at the same time pretty frustrating to everyone, to the agent. That's a very difficult work, and to the caller. People tend to be frustrated from the second they press dial. Something about that is uneasy, from the voice menus all the way to an agent that is or is not knowledgeable. And it all starts and ends actually with how expensive that is. If you're speaking to a person, that person has to be paid, naturally. And if it's a banker, it's even more expensive, or if it's an insurance professional and so on, or a healthcare professional. And then companies try to save, and customers just feel that companies try to save money servicing them, and then the clash begins. So our first idea that started the company is putting the menus, these IVR, interactive voice response menus, on the screen. Therefore, CallVu, we write it in a bit of a funny way, is call and then V and U. It was, I want to say it was popular, giving these funky names back then, maybe even now. And then that's what we started from. So you called, and then you saw the menus on the screen, which makes the navigation easier and makes you hopefully wanting to achieve a little more with the automated part of the call. And then you can go to talk to a person. We can talk about that later. This in between self-service, but maybe semi-self-service. And then we went, the call got to an agent, and then agent said, "Why won't we be able to control the call further, to put some more on the screen?" So we did that. That's our collaboration. And then we figured that most of what we collaborate on are digital forms. So we created our own version of digital forms. And the important part in ours is not necessarily the signature. You can sign it with your finger, or say, I accept and agree if you want, or sign with your finger. But since this is customer services, quite often the form is filling multiple items together with the agent, because forms in professional context sometimes are confusing or complicated or valuable in a way that I want your help doing whatever I need to do to feel more confident. So these are unique channels, and then all different channels that are digital, outbound over mail, web pages, and so on and so forth. So we started from some specific unique channels that are somewhere in between visual IVR and collaboration, somewhere in between digital and the real world, and then expanded to all digital, to more standard digital. And the later part of the story is that creating digital processes is something that we found that companies tend to do and then do a little more and then much more and then change. So the need for rapid creation and easy changes and lower cost of ownership and being agile practically with regards to cost and without just being able to change things tomorrow if I need them and create few versions is another significant necessity. And with smaller companies, keeping that not necessarily very expensive is also something that is important. So we took the first parts, various digital channels, and created our own version of drag and drop. So I would say that with CallVu, creating any customer service, and we start with a micro process. So each customer services related topic is one type of a journey. Creating a journey with us is as simple as it is to create a web page with Wix, for example. So just a generator or a studio where you create your journey and then multiple journeys and then distribute across channels.
So in preparation for this conversation, we're doing a little bit of research and came upon an article that referenced CallVu in, I believe it was Fast Company. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the article was quoting research that CallVu had done that had to do with how long people are willing to wait before talking to a human, which was really interesting because speaking to an awful lot of people in the CX world, that's one of those golden metrics that everybody tries to hold out there. But what I think I understood, and I don't know if you have any context to add to this, is that there's quite a variance in those tolerances. And it appears that those variances, some of them are probably personality based, but they can be largely circumstantial as well. And I don't know if you have any have that at your fingertips or recall which report this was from, but it seems to me that if we can bring any clarity to that key metric, that's going to be important to a lot of people listening to this.
So I think it starts with the perceived complexity of the topic I'm calling about. But there's another interesting part or piece to it, because currently nowadays digital is around for good, I would say 30 years. So people know it's there, and people tend to be in a mindset of, trust me, if I call, there is something I need from a person and not from self-service, which is something to keep in mind when trying to offer self-services to callers. Digital is not new. Everyone knows digital. People are not calling because they don't know where to find digital. They call because they think their issue or the topic they want to discuss is slightly more complicated or slightly more personal than self-service would take care of. And the perceived importance and complexity, therefore, is from their point of view, justifying a person to talk to. Now, there are some topics where it's almost, I would say, objectively correct. Things like an insurance claim. To me, as a caller, it might be perceived as complicated, or maybe it is really complicated. I want someone to help me and guide me through terminology, through the process, and maybe even, and that's part of, I think, many actual conversations, take responsibility so that whatever is submitted eventually is done with a professional or with someone who's halfway or maybe more responsible for the document or that submission to be accurate. So people, when they call, very often the set of mind is, believe me, I do need to talk to a person. And when using self-services in this context, we have to be respectful. So a little, I would say, careful with how aggressively we push people back to self-service if they called. Now, maybe one more thing to add to that is that we are all natural speakers. Our most, as people, our most natural way to communicate is by talking to one another. This is how we're built as humans. So people find it important and even comforting to talk to another person. And again, to change, to push people to a different channel is challenging. And if we do that, we need to do it in a way that considers what we just talked about, the preference, the feeling, the perceived complexity. We can talk about it going forward, but when we try to intervene in a call with a proposition for self-service, we would try to do it as an augmented option, so not instead of the voice channel. Instead, it's added to the voice channel. And one more thing that we try to do that is maybe somewhat unique in approach, in the approach we're taking, is semi-self. So kind of relax, you're going to talk to a person, but before you do, who are you? That's authentication, and what do you need? And maybe you want to read and sign something that is halfway or taking you towards the process. And then when you are talking to someone, the call is shorter and more focused, and that's cost saving. Or maybe doing that, starting to provide information, you'd figure that, okay, if I lost my credit card and I know, I want to block it for 48 hours and know what's the number of the gas station I last used it at, I don't really need a person. So we will try to divert the call, but do it in a way that is kind of respectful and try to lead you to the decision that you don't need to talk to a person, or if you still do need to talk to a person, take you to that person with the added information with you.
Interesting. I'm referencing that article in Fast Company again. What was based on what you just said, the article, it wraps up that section of it by saying the survey commissioned by customer experience platform CallVu offers a compelling rebuke of automated customer service solutions at a time when companies are leaning into chatbots like never before. And yet, I think that's not necessarily correct, because what you're talking about here is a hybrid approach. You're certainly not saying one or the other. I mean, that seems to be what CallVu is all about, and I think what 99% of CX professionals would advocate for. So it's not really a rebuke at all. I take a little bit of issue with the way this is wrapped up here, especially having heard from the CEO himself on it. But there's clearly a strong preference by people who are calling in, if they have decided they have a compelling reason to speak to another human, that they're willing to wait to speak to a human in overwhelming numbers. Just, how long and how well is it handled? I think those things are more the responsibility of the recipient of the call, but clearly they're willing to. So there's not really a rebuke here at all. It's simply, what's the best way to handle a customer inquiry or customer complaint if you already know they prefer speaking to a human, and that's fairly knowable.
I completely agree. And speaking about that, I have to say that I take I try to take both sides, the side of the customer who is calling and probably rightfully thinks he has the right to talk to a person, and that his matter is important enough, and assuming he already considered the digital option, he's now made a decision that the company needs to respect and talk to him. So that's one side. And the other side is the side of the company, and providing a human response, allowing a customer to talk to a representative is indeed very, very expensive. That other person needs to get paid. He needs to be knowledgeable and needs to have the tools. And indeed, large companies has customer services teams that are tens of thousands. Some are even in the way on the way to 100,000 employees that takes calls. Otherwise, people in time of need will wait forever or very, very long. And that's hyper expensive. And people need, and this is taking the company side, people needs to realize that if I'm going to the bank, I'll have to drive and park and pay for all that and take the time and then wait in line. There will be people in front of me in the line, and I'll respect that. Somehow, when people are calling, they expect the whole situation is easier. Calling is less of an effort than going physically to a place, and still I as a caller, I'm expecting people or the other side to pick up my call with a very knowledgeable and capable person very, very fast. So I think the truth is somewhere in between.
Picture your organization as a solitary island amidst a vast, churning sea of opportunities. On the horizon lie other islands, relationships waiting to be built, partnerships waiting to be formed. But between your island and those distant shores stretches a turbulent expanse filled with uncertainty and risk. You're going to need a bridge, or bridges, plural, to span this divide, connecting you to new horizons. Those bridges are strategic partnerships. Yet, building bridges and partnerships is no simple task. They both require careful planning, precise engineering, and a deep understanding of the terrain. Missteps can lead to collapse, leaving your business stranded on its island. Tectonic builds strategic partnerships, helping organizations navigate the treacherous waters, ensuring that those bridges are strong and resilient and scalable. There's a reason why some of the largest, most progressive companies in the world are retooling their revenue models and investing in partnerships. Find out more at tectonic.co. That's tectoniq.co. I'd like to talk for a few minutes about the various ways companies measure their success or failure as it relates to customer experiences. And there are all kinds of metrics out there. We have healthy debates internally here about which ones are useful and which ones should have been thrown away a couple of decades ago, but that's just internal. You're a working professional running a company that probably deals with these metrics day in, day out. They're probably vital to the way you do business and your customers do business. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to call out 5 different metrics that are all very, very popular, but maybe we can just unpack those a little bit, see if there are other ones out there that you feel might be helpful in this realm, or should we just go about creating something that is universally useful? So the first one is success rate. We kind of have, there are various kind of sub-definitions of what success rate might be: opt-in and reuse rate, average handle times, first call resolutions, and of course, customer satisfaction and net promoter scores. It's that last one that ends up bringing up the most debate here internally. We have certain advocates for NPS that are diehard, and I don't care what or how useless the information that you derive from it is, it will never go away. And yet, we see a lot of companies who are taking a bit more sophisticated approach to CSAT and NPS kinds of understandings, but doing it with a bit more sophisticated data-based algorithmic approach, if you will. So I've just thrown a lot of stuff on your plate. We've got success rate, opt-in and reuse, average handle time, first call resolution, CSAT and NPS. When you're talking to your clients, what are the key metrics that you're advocating they look at, and yourselves internally?
So I must say that the later one that you mentioned, Net Promoter Score, that there are multiple debates around, and even the math is a little more sophisticated or complicated, is still quite popular. And indeed, the question of would you recommend makes some sense. It's kind of, it's wrapping up the inner parameters of bottom line, is it useful and valuable or not? And we tend to measure it because it's popular and well known and comparable. Then average handling time and first contact resolution are more the more numeric measurements of a successful process. The challenge, the problem is that it varies. You have to measure that for each and every type of interaction. Otherwise, it's somewhat useless. And there's a bit of a risk in pushing these too hard. For example, average handling time, you sometimes talk to an agent where you almost feel as if that agent is measured by keeping the call as short as possible, and that's inconvenient. So it kind of contradicts the Net Promoter Score and other customer satisfaction matrices. And going back to some unique technologies, I want to think that what we do tries to be unique in a way, allowing a hybrid approach can reduce average handling time without compromising the ability to succeed, because some of the call is taken, or some of the topics of the call are taken out of the call, and the call still remains. So the notion, the idea of a semi-self-service tends to be an interesting one, to say the least. And one more thing that I think that wasn't in that list of measurements, that I think makes sense, or at least it does to us, is measuring the time per step. Some steps takes more time than others. If you're thinking about filling out a form or taking a process where there's several items to answer, or even several pages, several steps to that process. And it's interesting to measure success and time of every step. Think about going and asking the customer for customer ID, for example. That step can be long, but it makes sense, because once I'm on that step, I'd have to go and figure out where to find that step. Some other places, taking too long to answer a question might indicate that the question is unclear, or create some kind of an uncertainty. So maybe that's another measurement. If we don't have enough already that I want to throw into the mix, I would say item handling time. So not an average, or maybe an average, but per item and not per the entire process.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it makes an awful lot of sense. And especially, I mean, I think it also gives every organization who's using it to apply their own kind of set of contexts, as you've said, because if you're an insurance company and you need to, somebody needs to replace a card versus speak to whatever that is, from the most simplistic inquiry down to the most complex, you now have a way of measuring that.
And there's two more I want to suggest. Perhaps one is somewhat similar to Net Promoter Score, but it would be Service Promoter Score. Asking about, would you recommend the bank's services or the phone company's services to someone else takes into consideration a little too much. If I'm happy with the broadband, if I'm happy with I don't know content that my phone company provides to me, yeah, I would recommend even if the service wasn't great. So such question that blends the services and the customer services, or the service in this call, might be a little unfair. I might be happy with one,
You're
or
mixing
unhappy.
two different ideas and asking
Exactly.
for one metric
Exactly.
to one grade.
So perhaps a service promoter score or customer service promoter score. And one more is, and it actually connects to AI now, is an open question. Since what we're doing with the phone services as well as with digital services is being digital on both, it's as easy to add another question that you might or might not answer. Probably not, by the way. The number of answers is limited because people wouldn't bother to answer that every time, but some would. The same way you see responses and people voicing themselves on Airbnb or Booking or different sites for different stores. And it would be, what did you think about the company or the services today? The reason why it now makes more sense than ever to ask such question is that we can, and other companies hopefully will be able to do that, or maybe can already, to analyze the sentiment of these answers and summarize them very easily, much easier than before. If last year it wouldn't make sense to ask such question, because if you got 10,000 answers a day, no one can read them, or read them and in a way that is valuable for the company. Now I can ask AI, which is a no-brainer. Could you please collect the feedbacks with a positive sentiment and a negative sentiment, and help me realize what was said today, this week, this month, and even get to a little deeper resolution, like are there differences in numbers of, or in types of sentiments between days, between weeks, holidays, and so on.
So you would call that kind of just a kind of a re-ask of NPS, or
so the first, that is numeric. What did you think about the service? I would call a service promoter score,
right?
Rather than promoter score that, again, as you said, blends the service that I'm getting from the company and the service that I got from the human that just talked to me together, right, which is a little bit difficult to tell the difference between, and know what was good or bad, and what's not. So that's that. And the second part is maybe an open-ended question, or we can think and give it a name. Kind of
open-ended sentiment question or something like that.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Share with us your thoughts, your experience. And again, with AI, you can even ask a very open-ended question and then ask AI to analyze which answers are related to the services the company provide and which related to the services that an agent provide. So yeah, that's a very valuable actually tool that was added.
Yeah, and you're right. If you had tried to deploy this last year, it would have been an entirely different set of answers. This year, it's
And impossible to analyze.
yeah, at that volume. Well, Ori, thank you so much for your time today and for your thinking and for kind of giving us the perspective from the top of at least your corner of the CX world. We will, of course, post a link to CallVu. I invite all of our listeners to check out the company. But Ori, again, thank you. And I'm so looking forward to the next time we get to do this.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Thank you so much for your time.